The following discussion is intended for a teenage or older audience and may contain heavy themes or be too articulate for kids younger than the age of 13. Also, the following discussion centers around media that is intended for a teenage or older audience, and the content that's referenced here could not be suitable for kids under the age of 13. Viewer discretion is advised. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies, released in the early 2000s, but still had a big enough impact to still be talked about to this day, similar to Nolan's Batman trilogy. However, while the Nolan movies are easily the greatest Batman stories put to film, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy has a mixed reception, especially when compared to the other two film adaptations of Spider-Man. Some people love them, some can't stand them, and some are just mixed on them. I'm obviously one of the people who love these movies. However, it isn't because I'm mind controlled by early 2000s nostalgia. I genuinely have good reasons as to why I think these movies still hold up and manage to be great superhero movies. However, first I want to go over the Spider-Man character. Spider-Man isn't loved by many because of his cool abilities, iconic costume, or best rogue gallery second to Batman. It's because of who he is as a character. Spider-Man is easily the most relatable superhero since he tries to live a mostly normal life but will drop anything to help people and do the right thing. Because of this, Spider-Man is probably the most heroic superhero. Bruce Wayne puts on the mantle of Batman because he feels obligated to help Gotham. Bruce feels that being Batman is all that's left for him. Batman is the identity and Bruce is the mask. However, Peter Parker is a hero and Spider-Man is nothing more than a symbol/weapon he uses to enforce his heroic attitude. Yes, I think Spider-Man is more heroic than my favorite superhero, Batman. Because while Bruce has nothing left to lose other than Gotham, Peter has everything to lose. And yet he still puts on the mask and saves the day. The reason Spider-Man is such an important superhero is because while every other superhero feels godly and untouchable, Spider-Man feels like a regular young man who's just trying to do the right thing. However, sometimes when doing the right thing, it always doesn't end well for Peter, and sometimes it may even come at the cost of something or someone he loves. And yet, he still continues being Spider-Man. That's why, in my opinion, Spider-Man is the purest of superheroes. However, you may be wondering how Marvel's most popular character ended up with Sony. Well, Marvel wasn't always the huge titan of good superhero movies we all know today. On the contrary, most, if not all, Marvel movies were huge flops both critically and financially. And plus, Marvel wasn't doing so well financially, so they were forced to sell their beloved wall collar to Sony and Wolverine and the Fan Force stick to Fox. So naturally, while Sony owning the IP of one of the biggest superheroes, it was pizza time, movie time. And so Sony hired Sam Raimi behind the iconic original Evil Dead movie to direct the Spider-Man movie. So that was the origin story behind the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. Did he do a good job? Well, it's time to dissect these three movies for each trait that contributes to their overall quality. I'm going to start with the trait of these three movies that usually divides people: the cheesiness. One huge pet peeve of mine is when hearing people critique these movies, they view the cheesiness as unintentional and distracting from the plot. These movies came out at a time before The Dark Knight. You know, the movie that finally showed you can make good, dark, and complex superhero movies. Back then, superheroes were looked at as a goofy genre solely intended for kids, not to be taken seriously. Basically, a parent in the 90s would have a heart attack if they saw a movie like Joker. So the cheesiness of these movies is not only a product of the time, but it's clearly intentional on Sam Raimi's part. It's clear as day that Sam Raimi and everyone involved is having a blast making these movies. Do you think the Blackout characters are cartoony? Good, you're supposed to think that. Do you think the Green Goblin is goofy and over hyperbolic? Good, you're supposed to think that. Do you think the dance in Spider-Man 3 is dumb and cringy? Good, you're supposed to think that. Speaking of Spider-Man 3, I can understand people think the pacing is all over the place, but one thing that's aggravating is when people critique it for being too goofy. Did you even watch the previous two movies? The goofiness is supposed to be fun, and it's a part of what makes this trilogy so distinct from other movies. It's a part of these movies' identity. If you don't like cheesiness in your superhero movies, I completely understand. It's not for everyone. But for the love of God, saying these movies suck because they're too cheesy is the equivalent of saying Joker sucks because it's too unsettling. That's what the movie is going for. And plus, it's not like these movies are devoid of any original substance. Yet again, that's not the case. I'm going to have my head ripped off and put on a pike, but I think these movies do the best at capturing the character of Peter Parker better than both the Amazing Spider-Man and MCU incarnations. Let me explain. While I really dislike the Amazing Spider-Man movies, they do a great job at portraying Spider-Man. Spider-Man is a cheeky, overconfident superhero who uses his brain to handle situations. If someone were to say this was their favorite Spider-Man, I would completely understand. However, notice how I say Spider-Man rather than Peter. For how would they do it portraying Spider-Man? They do a miserable job portraying Peter Parker. The fact that Peter is a loser who works really hard to get the things he wants is a good contrast from Spider-Man, who is a loved hero who seemingly saves the day no matter what. That's because when Peter puts on the mask, he feels bigger. He feels like he can do almost anything, hence why he's so confident as Spider-Man. However, that trait of empowerment doesn't work when Peter is already confident. Literally, the first time we see Peter in The Amazing Spider-Man, he's skateboarding in the school hall. Peter is already confident and cool, so when he puts on the mask of Spider-Man, that whole thing about feeling larger than yourself doesn't work. And plus, Peter being a loser is what made him so relatable. Whether you currently are or were popular in school or not, everyone could identify with Peter. However, if he's skateboarding down the hall and confidently hitting on his clutch, there's going to be many people who can't relate to someone as confident as that. And plus, he's played by Andrew Garfield. That's like making a live-action Phineas the Third movie and casting Samuel L. Jackson as Belgium. Disney, please don't get any ideas. Andrew Garfield is way too cool to play Peter Parker. Now looking at the MCU incarnation. It's so painful watching Homecoming and Far From Home because they're so close to being 5 out of 5 movies, but they miss an important aspect of Peter: consequences. Remember when I said that sometimes Peter doing the right thing comes at the cost of something he loves? Yeah, well, that is what makes Peter such a great hero, that despite how painful it is sometimes being Spider-Man, he does it anyways. The ramifications of being Spider-Man is what makes Spider-Man so interesting, and the MCU movies miss that point. While Peter is a really faithful adaptation from the comics, there's a lot of focus on his normal life, and his villains are a lot of fun. You never feel being Spider-Man is hard. While it's definitely touched on in some parts of these movies, it's never utilized enough. While the post-credit scene in Far From Home gives off the impression that they're going that route, let's be real. The third movie is going to be a lighthearted adventure with a few serious moments sprinkled throughout, but not enough to make the story impactful. The reason I spent so much time on these movies is so it would be easier to convey how the old trilogy succeed in telling a good Spider-Man narrative, but the more recent movies fail. And that's because these movies focus on something important. It sucks being Peter Parker. For everything that goes right for Spider-Man, something goes wrong for Peter. These movies are good at telling a Spider-Man story that takes risks. One thing to bring up is that all of these movies have a different arc for Peter. The first movie is Peter learning what it means to be a hero and learning responsibility. The second movie is Peter running away from his responsibilities once the mantle of Spider-Man becomes too much to bear. But in the end, he returns to being a hero despite the many obstacles. The third movie is Peter becoming so full of himself and overconfident to the point where it becomes unbearable, and the Venom symbiote amplifies his new selfless nature, but then he remembers what being Spider-Man was all about in the first place. Notice how each plot involves Peter making a mistake, but in the end learning something makes him a better hero. That's Spider-Man. Spider-Man is a naive teenager who is always tasked with prioritizing being a hero above his own desires. Sam Raimi nails what Spider-Man is all about. In fact, my favorite Marvel superhero of all time, Spider-Man 2, the ramifications of being Spider-Man are as follows. Peter loses his job, his best friend hates him, the love of his life moves on and finds someone else, he's late for all of his classes, and he has to sell photos to James Jonah Jameson that enables him to tarnish Spider-Man's reputation. This is why Spider-Man 2 is such a good Spider-Man movie. It captures the most important element of Spider-Man's story. Being Peter Parker sucks. And you know what? Peter loses his powers, and after one of the most heartbreaking scenes in any superhero movie, this happens.
Raindrops keep falling on my head, and just like the guy whose feet are too big for his bed,
and when the borderline is tau equals 0, the eigenvalues are someone, please.
0.23 electron volts.
Excellent work today, Parker. Keep it up.
Nothing's worrying me.
Yep, Peter's life is generally better. Since he doesn't have to be Spider-Man anymore and he's allowed to live life as Peter Parker, his life is awesome. But in the end, Peter returns to being Spider-Man because the city needs him, and despite the perfect life he's giving up, he still continues being Spider-Man because with great power comes great responsibility. Sam Raimi knows his shit, and for people who still think Sam Raimi didn't care that much in the writing process of the story, do you know that right after Spider-Man 1 was released, while his entire crew was celebrating, he went straight to writing Spider-Man 2, since he was stressed over making a movie better than the original? Not only does Sam Raimi care about the story of these movies, but he understands Spider-Man perfectly. Both Spider-Man 1 and 2 were great movies, and Spider-Man 3 probably would have been on the same level as its predecessors if he wasn't harassed by the studio to throw Venom in there. And despite how he had to make a movie about a villain he didn't care for, I think he still did a good job. That's right, I like Spider-Man 3. There's so many insanely good story elements and themes that are constantly overlooked because people are too busy making fun of the bad stuff. some of which aren't really bad but were mistakenly identified as unintentional. Real quick, I want to talk about the dance scene. Guys, I love making fun of this dance scene as much as you do, but seriously, it's not as much of a big deal as people make it out to be. People usually say that the Venom symbiote is supposed to make you cool and not dorky. Wrong, it's supposed to make you think you're cool. It's supposed to inflate your ego and make you think you can do whatever you want. While dancing, Peter thinks he's acting cool, but us, the audience, are supposed to laugh at how stupid he looks. I never got why people made a huge fuss about this dance scene. It's supposed to be cringy and stupid. It's like looking at Drax and calling his character stupid because he doesn't get sarcasm. Yeah, that's the point. Almost like Peter looking stupid is supposed to be the joke. In fact, do you know that originally this segment was supposed to play right after Peter and Harry's dramatic encounter, ending with Peter throwing a grenade at his former best friend's face? Does that sound messed up and dark? Yeah, that's the point. I agree that it does go on for a little too long, but so has the segment, so I'm moving on. Another thing that I want to touch on is the villains. The thing I love about these Spider-Man movies is that each villain personally affects Peter. Norman Osborn is not only Peter's best friend dad, but he's also viewed Peter as a second son to him. Dr. Octavius is Peter's idol and is everything Peter wanted to be when he grew up. The second Green Goblin is obvious as Peter's best friend. Sandman turned out to have killed Uncle Ben, which pulls Peter closer to the darkness of the whole Venom subplot. And Eddie Brock is just a douchebag because it's a reflection of how Peter would have turned out had he let the symbiote consume him. I love how all these villains have a personal connection to Peter and are all utilized to service not only the plot but also Peter's character journey. One thing this trilogy surprisingly does well are the effects. Okay, maybe the first Spider-Man is iffy, but Spider-Man 2 and 3 are mind-blowing when it comes to this aspect. It's been 16 years since Spider-Man 2 came out, and I'm still baffled as to how Doc Ock's robotic arms look so darn good. Probably because they were surprisingly practical for the most part. And don't get me started with Spider-Man 3. Look at this scene. Look at that. And say what you want about this Venom, but his effects somehow look better than the effects used for the recent Venom movie. How was all this possible for 2006? Well, fun fact, this movie was so expensive, there's rumors that the studio exceeded their budget and Sony had to give them additional money just to finish the project. That is insane. For the time these movies came out, they looked insane, and Spider-Man 2 and 3's effects still compare to most Hollywood movies released nowadays. That's just crazy. And finally, the last thing I want to talk about is the amount of passion that went into these movies. I'm not saying the other Spider-Man movies aren't passionate. The MCU ones clearly are, and the director of The Amazing Spider-Man was really passionate, but like Spider-Man 3, got bullied by the studio to have to include a bunch of crap. However, this trilogy was insanely passionate and ambitious. The amount of things that Sam Raimi perfected about Spider-Man's character and the many themes and symbolism throughout the three movies really do say a lot. One thing I cannot stand is when a movie or a TV series is soulless and lacks any identity and just exists to making money. Hence why I hate shows like Teen Titans Go and movies like the Star Wars sequels. However, this trilogy is not here to waste your time. It is here to give you an ambitious story about your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Even if the stuff that didn't work in Spider-Man 3, I still like it because Sam Raimi and the writers are trying to tell an ambitious story of great themes and characters. While the movie bites off more than it can chew, the good stuff is still really good, and that's why I like it along with the rest of the trilogy. Looking back, this video is kind of all over the place in terms of pacing and discussion, but what can I say? I am really passionate about these three movies, and there was a lot I wanted to say. The original trilogy still wows me of how well it juggles early superhero teas of heartfelt stories and characters. Mix that with great action effects, and this trilogy, while it may not be a perfect movie trilogy, is certainly a good Spider-Man trilogy. And the third MCU Spider-Man makes up for the previous two's lowest tension while also being a masterpiece of a film while bringing justice to the Spider-Man character, then that trilogy could very well pass the original trilogy in quality. But as it stands, no Spider-Man stories can compare to the heartfelt vision Sam Raimi had.
Living on the edge, body crying, spinning webs, swinging from the highest ledge. He could leap above our heads.
Okay, maybe that. Alright, can you give me something that pales in comparison to the original trilogy?
Fine. I will save you all by crawling up your wall and spinning you a web that will not let you fall. I'm Spider-Man. I Spider-Man. I am Spider-Man. You don't have to ask, the man behind this mask will answer every call. I'm here to save you all. I'm Spider-Man. I Spider-Man. I am Spider-Man. I'm Spider-Man evildoer, and you just got bit!
Ah, thank you.